Before we get started today, I want to say thank you for every single like, comment, recommendation, and a very special thank you to my listener support group. If you like what we do here at Off the Deep End Podcast, please consider checking out the listener support tab on our channel's anchor link. Without you, we would not be able to continue the great work we're doing with these conversations, breaking down boundaries and helping heal each other by sharing our stories, our trials, our tribulations, and how we process them. Let's jump straight into this episode. Before we continue, I want to just let you know that here at Off the Deep End Podcast, we do talk about some things that can be extremely triggering for some of the listeners, whether it's domestic violence, suicide prevention, mental health resources, veteran stories, active shooters, fitness, and even recovering from addictive substances. There's only one place I go to spread my message of positivity about not just going through things, but growing through them as well. For this, I use Anchor.fm. It allows my listeners to listen on over 7 platforms with a click of a button. Make sure you download Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started sharing your story. All right, what's happening, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Author Demon Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Anthony Schuman, and I'm so excited. Not only is he a veteran, he's also a superstar when it comes to comedy. So I'm thankful to have you, brother. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It's great to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's start at the beginning, the nitty gritty, and sometimes the shitty. What was your childhood like?
So I think like a lot of people that end up in the military, not great. I definitely joke about it on stage that I'm not a West Point veteran. I'm a welfare veteran. I didn't join up because I was trying to be some honorable person. I was trying to go to college, trying to make ends meet. So I think like a lot of people come from rocky upbringing. I'm a kid of divorce. I'm a kid raised by a bipolar, manic depressive mother who like kept me from my dad growing up. And then, once I finally got out of that situation, finally moved in with my dad. 6 months later, my dad died. So it was just like, boom, kick right to the teeth. So from there, I lived with my or before I moved with my dad, bounced around foster care for a little bit, then moved, got finally got placed back with my dad. Then after I was with my dad, we moved with my aunt and uncle. And my uncle just passed away this last year, um, which is yeah, I'm still kind of dealing with that one because it's like and I think part of the reason some of us get into the military is we need a male role model,
Mm.
and like we've kind of gone through life looking for somebody to look up to, and
You
the
know, I think
military.
you really touched on it right there, my brother. I wanted to say my condolences for the loss of your father. You know, Lord knows how tough that could have been,
Yeah,
and for your uncle as well. Having a positive role model or wanting a role model is something that all young men do.
yeah, I think the military is set up that way, right? And it's laid out in front of you like, there's all these people to look up to, and that's how it goes, and then you move up as you become the person to look up to. And it's a system, and it plays into like our cardinal wants and needs, and like we have this want for there to be a leader, and then some of us rise to be a leader, and it's just like it's just who we are as humans, right? Like it's just how we operate. And no matter like what situation or what group or any of these things, we kind of always kind of end up in that same kind of path where somebody's like the one that everybody's looking up to, and they're the one with the charisma, and they're kind of leading the charge. And it's that's the kind of the way it works. And it can be, anything from business to, nonprofit groups. We all kind of end up that way. So I think that's kind of pushed me to the military. And when I got in the military, honestly, for me, it was until deployment, it was like nice. Like I got there, we had bedtime snacks, we had people like checking in on us. I mean, they're making sure we ate our vegetables. It's like it was all like I didn't have that growing up. So like all of a sudden I'm like, this is like summer camp.
Mhm.
Like I'm hanging out with making all these friends, hanging out with all these dudes, I mean, I've said it like so many times. Basic training to me was like the best part of the military. I don't know about you, but like
Yeah, absolutely.
I've made friends that I still keep in touch with from basic,
Lifelong relationships.
and it was all jokes, right? It was all just like we were in this terrible situation. We were all slowly realizing what we got ourselves into, right? Because we were infantry dudes, and not only were we infantry dudes, we were like my whole platoon was like guys that were like 18 X-ray contracts
Mhm.
and Ranger contracts.
Oh
So they
God.
were,
Tim Kennedy in his book, Scars and Stripes, breaks down what the 18 X-ray program. So shout out to him for doing that because I had no idea what the hell you were talking about
yeah.
until he did.
So I was 18 X-ray contract. So
Okay.
my whole platoon's like we're all smart guys, but we're all slowly realizing that we were stupid enough to sign up for this, right? Because you even if you just start playing the numbers game, right? You start realizing how many of us are on these contracts, and then how many of us are going to make it that next round, and then how many of us are going to make it that next round. You start being like, needs of the army is coming really soon for a lot of us, and that's infantry, and that's we're just we what did we do, like we all signed up thinking we were going to be elite soldiers. And
Mhm.
for me, I knew about halfway through basic when I could not get my runtime down to save my life. I barely passed. I barely passed that run. Like I got to that last PT test, and I'm like, push-ups, breathing, sit-ups. I like my drill sergeant literally stopped me on push-ups and sit-ups because he's like, you need to save it for the run, because that's the like we know you can do this, we know you can do that. Like I can score like whatever the top was for those to get the max points, so I just max them out, and then it's like now I gotta get the run, and I could barely get the run. And so like I knew I was like, I'm not making it through airborne training with this, with my like I can't get any faster. Like I was like, I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna get faster. It's gonna happen. But I guess some of us are just slow, and it's never gonna happen.
Some people are not natural runners. One thing I would say to anybody who's above 6 foot tall, just open your legs more, stretch more, and practice doing that a little bit faster. First, open your legs, stretch more, stretch more, stretch more, and then just run faster. But I'll tell you what, I was 5'11", or no, I was 6 foot flat, and then I dropped to 5'11" when I cut water for my bodybuilding shows and stuff like that. But normally I'm 6 foot, sometimes 6'5", depending on how much the body changes when you diet, when you do all these things. But my run time running with for me was a peace of mind. I felt like I was running and escaping for something. So when I would run my 6 miles a day before the sun goes down, when I was getting ready for the Navy,
Yeah,
I didn't have any plans on anything crazy, but I knew that once I got in the Navy and once I passed boot camp and stuff like that, I could apply for these special contracts and go to
yeah,
these great routes. And my push-ups were dialed, sit-ups were dialed. I was an athlete in high school. I played, I was a three-sport athlete, so I was sprinting these runs across
yeah.
the city of Linwood, Washington, and back. And I, at the end of it, I'd barely break a sweat after the first 3 months of doing that.
I
But a lot
hated
of
people
track
like you.
time. But the runs, running, running is not for everyone. And I say now, if you ask me to go and run as much as I did when I was then, I'll say hell no. You
No.
go ahead. It ain't me, man.
Yeah, I mean, but that's it. I mean, I realized like very quickly, like I this is I'm not getting like as much like, and I tried, dude. Like we jump rope in the barracks. My drill sergeant brought in jump ropes so I could jump rope in the barracks, and I'd work out with three guys in my platoon and do extra PT on my own, like because I didn't want to be the shitbag, like dragging everybody down either. And
Mm.
so like I didn't get that either. Like I didn't like it wasn't like, oh, I'm the last one to finish and everybody's like this piece of shit. It was like I'm the last one to finish. A dude ran back like a mile to run the last of the 2 miles with me. So he did 2, 3 to get back to me and ran the last mile with me in the time it took me to do the 2 miles, right? This PT instead of a freaking cranked ass dude does it in like 6 minutes. But and so but it's like that. It's like it was like camaraderie. Like it's like everybody pushing. Like they're seeing that it's like I'm not like not giving it my all. I'm like passing out at the end of this run, completely gassed to get these times. And I knew like I'm not gonna. We're going needs the army. So I went to the 101st, which if you don't like running, that's the worst place you could probably go. And then I literally deployed like 2 weeks later. So like I had like my 2 weeks leave. I got there and I had 2 weeks before I deployed. They literally gave me the packing list. They're like RFIs out of everything to issue it to you. So you're gonna have to buy all this stuff and you need to have it here on Monday. And so
Oh
like I didn't
yeah.
even have money, like I didn't even have like money yet. Right. Like those basic paychecks, they all went to like paying for all the stuff you got in basic. And so I had to like come up with money to get all this stuff and like piecemeal crappy stuff together. It's like you need a multi-tool, and like so I got like some crappy multi-tool. Then like 10 seconds into deployment, it breaks, and I'm like, great, now this
Oh
is what
man.
I have.
And the 101st Airborne is a very prestigious
Yeah,
unit to be a part of. It's in every single video game. It's in World War II. It's across the history books. You're on with the big dogs.
yeah. So and like and you go through basic, and they're like, you're not going to deploy right away. If you get to a unit, you have to go through training and all this kind of stuff. So even like I'm getting there, I'm like, okay, so worst case scenario, 6 months from now, I'm deploying. And it was literally 2 weeks. And I was like, I flew my wife. We got married on that between, right? Just like most soldiers do. Most good soldiers. We get
All
married
the
right
all the
after
good
basic.
ones. All the
And
good
then
ones.
and then I was gone. And then that was it. And so like I learned everything on the job. My first time driving a truck was in country, in a war zone. Didn't know what I was doing. No, like they're like, "Do you have a driver's license?" I was like, "Was there like a time that we got that?" Because I wasn't there, guys. And they're like, "Well, you're the driver." So I was the driver for my vehicle for my team, for the thing. So like now I got like PTSD about driving because it's like just throw you in there. Like I've never driven an army vehicle before, so the amount of pressure of it's like your platoon sergeant sitting next to you because he's the TC, and you're driving $1 million vehicle, and he's like, Jesus Christ, cat, and he woke up the baby,
We'll got the baby.
and it's $1 million vehicle. All right, give me 1 second. Just
Yeah,
pause one
it's all good,
second.
brother. Hold on.
All right, so you're out in Afghanistan and they put you in a vehicle. It's $1 million vehicle and it's the biggest rollover hazard in the world. And they're like, don't roll this over and kill everybody. And now this is your job, right? And so and there's IEDs, so don't forget about that. So
No pressure.
no pressure. So that was a whole can of worms. Deployment was a whole can of worms. I was with second of the 502nd, 101st Airborne, 2010, 2011, like the real push into
Mm,
Afghanistan, Kandahar area. Um, like the big, lots of loss during that time,
yeah.
especially in the 101st, both there
Damn. And
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 with
that
first of
and
the
that can never
502nd.
be easy, my brother.
Yeah.
I want to wish you my sincere condolences. There's something I talk about often here is that we don't understand the loss and the effect of loss on our men and women who support and defend this Constitution and the United States that we have here. This idea, this freedom thing,
Mm-hmm.
people pay the cost every day to make sure that terrorists think twice before doing a 9/11 run, or that people think twice before sneaking up past the very, very penetrable southern border with IEDs, like in the movie
Yep.
Act of Valor. These movies, the Hollywood articulation of the things that our men and women do in the armed forces are they don't even brush the surface of the reality of losing somebody who you spent years with, 365 days. When you're when you're back home on leave, you're thinking about, oh God, is my buddy still safe? Is my
Yeah.
battle buddy still safe? Is my platoon sergeant or the people in my
Yeah.
platoon, are they okay?
I
What's
handed
what's
off
Donahu thinking?
with my battle buddy from basic. We like on your way out, you stop in Germany there to refuel, and he was on his way in, stopping in Germany. And we just so happened that 1 30-minute interval, we were in that airport together. There's a picture of us that we got. And it's just like literally, so like then like that whole next year, I'm just thinking about him, right? That's like I just like left. I know exactly where he went because he went to where I was. And so
Mhm.
it's like I know exactly what he's going into, what it's going to be. And it was a totally different conversation in that airport versus like the two guys that were singing Panama in basic training, thinking we were going to be like gung ho warfighters, like you're talking about. Like it's this Hollywood thing. And that conversation was completely different in the airport. It was more like, dude, this is scary shit. Please, like, keep your head on a swivel. Like, look out for everything.
I think we established these brotherhoods, this idea of camaraderie
Yeah,
amongst us as people in the army, soldiers, Marines, sailors, Air Force, whatever the hell they call them. I'm just gonna keep dogging on the Air Force because my stepdad was in the Air Force, and of course the Coasties, the Puddle Pirates.
yeah,
Whatever we go through, we create this camaraderie together, a brotherhood, this bond that is literally a lot of times stronger than your own blood. I'm closer, way closer with people who I was in the military with than with my own family,
yeah.
and then you see them and then you separate from them and it creates this weird thing. And I'm just going to go ahead and I don't want to be a self-diagnoser, but I'm going to say it. Separation anxiety is something that's very real. It's unspoken. I suffered from it terribly, and I
Mm-hmm.
still have issues with it, knowing that people who I was in the military with were going through things without me there. I get this weird thing saying it's my fault that they're going through this. I
Guilt.
could have protected them, because at the end of the day, knowing about something and then knowing the person I could have done something to intervene.
Yeah,
Um, are those some of the feelings that you have had to deal with?
yeah. So I've struggled massively with like survivor's guilt. So
I'm so
we got
sorry,
hit.
man.
We got hit. We hit by a lot of IEDs, but we got hit by one. Um, this one day, dismounted, walking through a field, and it was like a diamond formation, like my team leader at the top at the point, and then two guys, and then me in the back at the rear. Um, and then so I was a gizmo operator. Do you know what that is?
Yeah,
It's the For anybody that doesn't know, it's a metal detector. I don't think it actually works. I'm going to be honest with everybody. I think they give it to us. It's a myth. I'm going to be honest. Um,
please do be honest, man.
so you have this thing, and you have one at the front and one at the back of the formation, so that you can just, instead of turning the formation around, you can just go one way or the other, right? Like a train. So on the way in, I was point. On the way out, I was the rear, basically. So my team leader is carrying a javelin on his back. And as he's walking, right? And like all I can think about, I tried this on stage last night and it didn't work. And it's not going to work here because I was already kind of tearing up. But like all I could think about was he was going to rain down on me, right? That's it. All I could think about was like in 2 seconds, it's raining men on my head. Um, Worked better on you than it did at the audience. It was literally zero laughs. It
Well,
was
you
the
know what?
worst.
I'm gonna be honest. Bring in really really dark humor to lighten up a situation so we can pop that steam. We can decompress.
Yeah.
I think it's essential. I mean, and us as veterans, we do it all the time. To a crowd of people who never experienced dark humor like that, they wouldn't
But
laugh at the idea of the song "It's Raining Men" because the song is a funny song,
yeah,
right? It's a you play it for when the strippers come out. You know what I'm saying? The guy strippers, it's raining men. But
you're not
like,
thinking about it actually raining, man.
yeah, and and that is funny. Like the idea of the song, and it helps you. Dark humor can help veterans and people who go through the experiences cope.
I also
It's
think it's
hard. It's hard to talk about a friend that will carry a rifle, is carrying a rifle, and will shoot anybody to make sure you get home to your family safe,
Yeah.
falling down on you. It's
Yeah.
hard to talk about that with a clinical psychiatrist.
But
It's not hard to
but the
say, to
I mean
turn it into a joke and talk about it.
the truth is I thought I lost somebody instantly, right? It's that feeling of like instant regret, that feeling of I stuck my finger in a saw blade and there's no turning back, right? And it's that's the feeling. But like when we tell everybody these stories over and over again, I don't want to watch you get sadder and sadder as I go deeper into this story, right? I want like I have to relieve it at some point. I have to relieve
Mm,
the pressure.
yeah.
So like that's part of the storytelling, I think. And I think it comes from having a rougher childhood where I've had to share like, hey, my dad's dead in the middle of class whenever like a teacher brings up, hey, can you have your parents sign off on this? And I'm like, what if our parents are deceased, like, and instantly you start making jokes about it. Then like I'm like, okay, now I got to start making jokes about this because like I don't want to make everybody sad every time I bring this up. So like,
Or
you know,
yourself sad.
yeah, or yourself
And
sad.
a lot of people don't get that dark humor. They think that the military is, and people that are veterans are abrasive. They cuss
Yeah.
like a sailor. You're fucking right, we do.
Yeah,
You
because
don't want to see us tell the truth in a solemn way. It's horrible. It's
it is.
horrible to tell about sad stories. So
So even
I
even
I
that
appreciate
story
your humor.
doesn't have a sad ending. That
Mm.
story, in that moment, he was right on top of this IED, and somehow magically, it was in a ditch in a way that like all the shrapnel went this way. So he went into the plume of dust. Like I saw him disappear. I was like, he's gone. And like, so we got concussed, like all of us, every guy that was in my fire team, we all ended up getting taken off the line for a little bit. And this is where I carry the survival guilt is the next mission, the next guy up that took my spot to run that gizmo, he hit an IED and he lost his legs. And I still carry survivor's guilt about that. And I know that guy and I've talked to him and he's told me, he's seen me go to like do comedy and stuff. And he's like, man, I'm proud of what you're doing and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I've talked to him. I've been like, man, I feel so terrible about like this thing. And like, he said it's okay, but like, it's still something like I carry with me, and that deep survivor's guilt of like, that should have been me in that scenario, not him.
Mm. I have a friend who came on here recently, and he talks about survivor's guilt. There's a very, very weird, twisted way that we apply it to ourselves. It's a subconscious thing, though. It's not something that we're directing towards ourselves. And there's a bunch of great clinical psychologists that work with the military, and I'm thankful to know a couple who talked about this survivor's guilt thing in my presence. So I was able to receive what they were saying, and it's not something you ask of yourself. And from the outside looking in, it's easy to say, "Hey, it's not your fault," but it's not
Mm-hmm.
you who's saying that.
Yeah,
It's your
exactly.
brain. It's your brain, and it's kind of this sick, twisted thing we have. I would call it courage, bravery, responsibility of your person beside you in the
Mm-hmm.
in the fire team that gives us this. It's love. It's truly at the root of it. It's love for the person next to you that creates
Yeah.
what survivor's guilt is. And what I told my buddy last month is, I'm going to say it in a way to you as well, man. And I hope it kind of resonates with you. I'm proud of you for being able to talk about how you feel, and you already know that it's not your fault. It's not going to change the fact that you feel the way you feel. But I will say this: I'm proud of you for speaking about it, because you opening up about it, it's going to give avenues for others to open up about it. And so, thank you for being, open and honest, and bringing that up, man. It's not something easy to talk about. I have a lot of guilt issues, and I've been
Yeah.
working through them, but it's never easy.
It's not, man. It's like, and it goes into every facet of everything. So like even now as I'm trying to like get away from the military, right? Like so I got injured in that moment. Um I finished out my deployment, came home. I finished out my deployment like on, basically rear D, but in country, right? So like doing all that burn pit stuff that they talk about, did a lot of that. So I'm, anxious to see how that pans out. Um, so all that extra, duty for the last couple months, until, because I couldn't be on the line at that point. So,
Mm.
um, and all of us broke boys that couldn't be on the line kind of, you know, poked around the fob and did stuff like that until,
Do you get a bunch of shit for that?
from a couple people, but for the most part, no. I mean,
Good.
because at the end of the day, like, there's it was like that a thing happened, right? Like, there was
Yeah.
guys that were in the shit detail for getting in trouble or getting drugs, and we worked with them, right? Because we're all kind of in the shit detail together, because that's kind of where we all got stuck. But like, for me, no. I'm sure there was people that said stuff under their breath, but then I've also known people, like, after we've come back, that were like, man, that really sucked. You just got hurt and you didn't get to go home, and you had to just be stuck there, and, like, you know all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So,
And that was the
and
Afghanistan for you.
yeah, and I mean, there's like stuff like that. Like, we don't tell every story either. I don't know if, like, I have these, like, four stories that I am comfortable telling, that I have retold, over and over again. And, like, every once in a while something else, like, slips out. Like, one that slipped out, that I didn't tell my wife about this story until somebody else told her. It was one of those stories.
Oh
Like,
man.
like my buddy, when he got blown up, once again, I was a gizmo operator. So who's the guy that's got to go up there, get this guy out of the hole? Once again, I had known this guy for like 2 weeks. So we're talking about that whole trust thing, that whole love thing, the whole thing. I I don't know this guy from anything. He doesn't know me from anything. I'm plowing through everything because I'm just like, I'm getting this motherfucker out of this hole. I'm lifting him out of the hole with, like, all my strength. Luckily, I'm still strong at that time, fresh out of basic, pulling this dude up. And, like, I don't tell my wife that story because, like, that was terrible. That was a terrible day to me. Like, I remember, like, how scared I was, so scared. Like, that day compared to the other day, where, like, he just disappeared, and I was like, oh well, now I know what I'm gonna do this time, because, like, we've already gone through this, stress test a million times at that point.
Mm.
And so but that day was the first time anything happened. That was the first in-country contact, IED, anything. So all I remember was being so scared, and I was just like, I'm getting up to this guy and I'm getting him out of this hole, and that's
So
all I can do.
in a moment of absolute fear, being completely scared that you're gonna get blown up as well, you're gonna get shot because you never
Yeah,
know
where's
who's
the
watching.
secondary? Because
Where's
there's
the
always a
secondary?
secondary.
Because the secondary IEDs is a big issue,
We're all
and
covering, but
you
it's
had to walk
walls.
through that situation.
So that it's all cover for them to just fire, like, down on us. It's a fatal funnel
Oh,
of
fuck.
walls where he's stuck at. So, like, I'm just like, it's all the bad, like, all the bells going off in your head already, even as a new soldier. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I got to get to this guy, and I got to get him out of there, because that's what we got to do. And I'm the guy with the thing who's got to sweep up there to make sure we can get him out of there.
Mm.
And so, like, and all I remember is, like, I hated my platoon sergeant. I thought he was the biggest dick in the entire world. And the only thing I can say about him is, whenever shit hit the fan, he was the one guy you wanted to be in charge of everything. He was the nicest person on the planet. He had gave directions calmly, clearly. It was completely different than when he was, like, yelling at you all of the other time. And it was just like, whenever crap hit the fan, like, it was like, this guy's like, he's got it together. And, like, years later, you realize, like, he's putting space between you and him by yelling at you and treating you like shit because he doesn't want to lose people. And then he's also, like, being hard because he knows the little mess ups can lead to big mistakes,
Mm.
right? Like, those little things of, like, you go through that same gate twice. That's where they put the IED when you come back the third time, you know?
There's a lot of wisdom behind what you just said, man. Recognizing his leadership characteristics, as just gruntling as they might have been in the moment, being able
Yeah.
to recognize the value in them still. So I could tell you definitely had a lot of wisdom with that as well. One thing that stood out that you mentioned is his ability to be calm in those bad situations. It takes
Yeah.
an insane amount of bravery to grab your a fallen brother laying on the ground, bleeding out when an IED pops off.
See,
So,
but that it never
holy
feels like
shit.
bravery in the moment, right?
Holy
That's what
shit,
I'm
but you said
saying.
it says
It
you were just
I
scared,
didn't feel like that was a brave moment. And then it
but you
was
didn't
like
freeze up though, right?
he retold that we're doing this run for the fallen after we get
Mhm,
back, right? This big just battalion, everybody's going out, we're doing this. So it's all the families and we're just walking with him and he's like, "You know, your husband pulled me out of a hole when I got blown up." And I was like, "What, man?" I was like, "You didn't tell her like that this happened?" And I was like, "I mean, I didn't tell her everything that happened, man." And
mm,
he's told her the story is like as we're walking doing this run and it's just like you see in your wife like pride, right?
mm.
And it's you see that that's nice. But like it's just like I wouldn't have shared that, right? Like I wouldn't have been like, look at me do this. Like I shared like when something happened to me and I got hurt and I had to tell her that something happened. And there's still stuff that like I think something trickled out. Like we were just on vacation this last week and like a story trickles out where you're just like, man, this one time we were all like sitting around doing this, and then this thing happened, and then it started popping off, and we got shot at. And I smoked a cigarette with the guys, and it was like the first time I smoked, and I've like never smoked a cigarette. And this is kind of reminding me of that, just sitting here, like in the night air. And it's like, those stories that just like trickle out that you don't think about like maybe it's part of it, some of it gets pushed down, I'm sure, inside of us, like so we don't have to remember every little detail of everything that happened,
Yeah, you just touched on
but
it right
some
there.
of
It's
it's
called fog of war. We
yeah.
experience these traumatic experiences to the mind, and the mind says, "I don't want to remember this shit. This sucks." And we
It's
start
also weird
forgetting
that I just
things.
remembered it as nostalgia, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm
And
just
then
sitting
you
there like,
remember it as nostalgia when you have a smell, which is the
yeah,
definitely the strongest human sense out there. Or you hear a certain musical note that reminds you of a time, and then it puts you in the right mindset to let
yeah,
those moments of trauma kinda, de-stress. Kinda like that button on the pressure cooker in your kitchen.
yeah. You talk about music, man, and reintegrating and kind of getting out of the army and to kind of get that direction in the story. I didn't listen to music for 2 years after I got out of the military. Like it was that much of a there was always like it was always like it was this was before like you'd maybe have like your iPod with your playlist on it, but you're either listening to a CD or it's on the radio. So every time you listen to the radio, 3 songs in, something would come on that would just be like sad as hell. And then all these emotions would come rushing out. So it took me 2 years to like, mostly because of female singers, I blame them all because of their beautiful voices and they just hit me right in the heart and it gets me. And so like yeah, it took me 2 years. So I listened to podcasts, and that's really what got me into podcasts, which then in turn got me into stand-up comedy even deeper. So like I got in even deeper with listening to podcasts about comedians starting comedy, comedians learning how to do stand-up comedy, comedians kind of progressing through. I remember I started listening to Bert Kreischer's podcast back then, and that was 2011, 2012, when he was struggling in clubs and struggling to kind of get things going. And since then, in just 10 years of listening to his podcast, now he's doing arenas and things like of that nature. So I've listened to like that progress with some of my favorite comedians over those years because I got really deep into it, much because I just didn't want to listen to music. So I got more podcasts. Doug Loves Movies was a big one, and that kind of led me to like a bunch more comedians because he'd always have a bunch of people on, and then I'd be like, oh, that person was interesting. Let me go listen to Josh Wolf's podcast. And I listen to Josh Wolf. And now I'm in that world, which is weird because I've gone from, listening to this, and it probably feels like this for anybody that kind of starts getting into TV or things where they've grown up watching something on TV and then they're like, now I'm on TV. It's like I'm in doing stand-up comedy, and some nights I'm in a moose lodge in the middle of nowhere 40 miles from here, and some nights I'm in Hollywood on stage with you know Caroline Ray going up before me, and it's like really cool shit. And so it's been this wild ride that, like, and I'll kind of give you kind of the abridged version, but it wasn't easy. Like, I got out of the military, I went into college, I got a service dog for a while for I was passing out from the concussion stuff, and then I the PTSD. And so I had my dog that I had actually owned before I joined the military, and I was training her to be like a hospital visit dog, right? So like to go visit people in the hospitals, and it's very extensive training, and it's actually was harder than the service dog training to get certified in that because of insurance and all that kind of stuff. So when I got back, I was like, okay, I'm going to train her up to be a service dog. So I worked with a local nonprofit. I did training sessions 2 times a week. Um, Taught her how to do all these tasks, taught her how to act in public, to be able to go places, all this kind of stuff. Didn't just slap something from Amazon on her, which kind of in the end ruined it for me. I'm going to be honest with people. If you're one of those people that just slap something on your dog from Amazon, go get them trained. It's or train them yourselves. It's a big problem when there's untrained dogs out there, because people with trained dogs have their dogs get reacted to by these dogs, and then or people won't let us in places anymore because these untrained dogs cause problems.
Mm.
And so it became a bigger headache to have her at the end than it was not, because it was just like more stress. Like, is the dog going to cause an issue being here? Is it not going to cause an issue? But for the first 4 years of it, especially going to college, she was like saved me. Like, it was like it just put this little barrier between me and like every interaction, and like slowly it started to move away, right? Like, first day of class, like, she's that conversation starter. Second day, and then as you go through the class, nobody's talking about your dog anymore, and you're just talking to people again, and that kind of barrier is gone, and she's just laying there sleeping. And it just allowed me to kind of slowly connect with people again, because for me, a big part of, like, we talked about the guilt and the love and that kind of stuff, I had a big problem connecting again with people. And I still kind of do, connecting with people, like getting those friendships again, to where it's like that friendship level of buddy that you're hanging out with, spending a bunk with. It's, I'm not going to share that sort of trauma with bond with anybody to like get there. But like at the same time, like, I'm putting up walls to where, like, I this guy might die tomorrow, so I might not want to get too close to him.
And that
I don't know
sucks,
what's gonna,
man.
you
I
know
um I find myself doing something similar. I talk I'm better at talking about it now. Last year I lost 24 friends to suicide, and it's a huge thing that it induced fear in me,
yeah,
honestly. Having friends, I'm scared of them wanting to hurt themselves on a
yeah,
level that I can't even put into words, and it took you talking about what you just talked about to make me be able to say it. I'm terrified. I'm terrified of another friend of mine taking their own life because they don't feel comfortable in their own skin, or they've been treated horribly by their parents, and then military trauma build on that, or military sexual trauma, or domestic violence, or body dysmorphia, dealing with loss. Suicidal
yeah,
ideations are a very powerful thing, and every time you tell them to fuck off, you get stronger. And a lot of people don't have a team though. A lot of people don't even know how to bring it up.
yeah,
It was perceived weak for men to talk about health for a long time. For women to talk about mental health, it seemed wrong because there was supposed to be this strong idea of a mother who can do anything and have children no matter what, and nothing's ever going to go wrong. Mom's got it right. No, it's not always that case, and I definitely understand where you feel, being scared to connect with people because you don't
Yeah.
want to lose them. Loss sucks. It
Yeah.
fucking sucks.
Yeah. And even in coming back, like started to get through stuff, started to process stuff. I did a veterans kayak fishing, and I got in with a group of guys there, and then I started working with a nonprofit there. But even there, like, I got, once again, like, made a friend. You start getting into this point where, like, you're hanging out with these people a lot. You're really getting close. And to me, like, the buddies I made fishing turned into family. It turned into another band of brothers. It turned into another, once again, because we're all stupid and we decided we had to do a hobby that we're going to go into the ocean on kayaks in Tupperware and fish for fish that are 150 pounds, and try to catch them. So let's see how that works out. So we're all going through these big waves and, crazy outings together. And sometimes it's a storm and sometimes it's calmest day ever. And um, started to get bond, and we lost a friend. We lost a buddy. One day we were out on the coast here in Washington, big fishing outing with all of us, hanging out, and he had a heart attack on the beach. And we were all, and this crashed my whole PTSD world down. And I hope this doesn't sound like I don't want to blame this guy. It was just kind of the sequence of events that made, like, it all come crashing down, because I was on the water. So I just heard it over the radio. And it was like all these events that, like, happen in deployment that you only hear over the radio, where you're wondering if your other buddies are okay, or the other platoon's okay, or the helicopter went down. I got to listen to what's going on. And so, like, I heard, all I could hear was over the radio. I'm too far out. Like, I'm paddling. The second I hear, like, he's down, we need help, I'm booking it. I'm just going. I'm headed for shore, but it's minutes at top speed. So I just heard it. That's it. And by the time I got to shore, it was just another friend there to, like, hug me, and he told me he was gone. And, like, just like that, like, I'd gone back, I had let people in, I had, like, opened this up, and it was like gone again, like, instantly. And it was like, it wasn't like there was no lead up, there's no warning. It's one of those, like a car accident, just happens. And so, like, that sent me down the rabbit hole. That brought so much up that I had been able to shove down and push down on my own. And it just started coming up, right? So
That's the scary thing right there.
yeah.
When we push down things and we like it's like my buddy Tilo says it in a good way. You hold the beach ball, 10 feet down below the surface and see how long you can hold it down there for. What's going to
Yeah.
run out first, your breath or your strength? You never know.
And then it
Um,
comes popping out of the
and
water
it goes
10
popping
times
out of the
higher.
water, and then you're shit out of luck. It
Yeah.
it's something that I discussed in merging veterans with players. It's the peer to peer support group I'm a part of over there. And we meet every Thursday. We talk about highs and lows of the week. We laugh, we joke, we bullshit over funny moments off the coast of Iraq.
Yeah.
And we talk about what it's like to regret some of the things you've done, and talk about we go to football games together, we go shooting together, we figure some stuff out. Having that tribe, that
Yeah.
that sense of camaraderie. But something I brought up as well is that the waves. I mean, I brought this up a couple weeks ago. The waves that we experience with these things. There's a lot of labels on it: PTSD, a sense of loss, not
Yeah.
being able to cope with death, because death is never obviously easy to cope with. It never is. But trusting somebody to be alive and then losing them when we know that life is not forever.
Yeah.
All these things we try to protect our feelings and our hearts from loss, but it's never an easy thing. The waves do show up, and it is that sucks, man. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
But I mean, it's like the thing, that wave came up, and, like, immediately, like, I started pushing people out, right? And I started, like, I went in, I had to go to inpatient for a little bit. um I tried to take my life. and it got rough. It got dark, and I I credit a big piece for me was I had to change my mindset of who I was as a person. I had to stop like looking around for like, am I this guy that's working for a nonprofit? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? And I was like, I'm just going to focus on being dad. I'm going to be a good dad. And so my focus went to just be a good dad, focus on getting the kids up every morning, focus on getting them off with their day every day, and just focus on that. Right. And I went from there. And once that kind of set in, I got into a group therapy away from, I had to get away from the VA. I'm going to be honest. I had to get away, not from the VA specifically, but I had to get away from the military group to
Mm,
get things started.
okay.
Right. Like every time, like a lot of military groups just turn into like sharing stories, and I needed to like share the childhood stuff first
Mm,
and not the war stories, because the
yes.
childhood stuff was where a lot of the roots of all of this for me comes from, like the abandonment, the separation, all of that, that comes from my childhood, and it was just made a million times worse by the PTSD and that kind of stuff.
And I think you hit on the head, of this nail that we keep driving into ourselves as a veteran community. It's something that I try to inspire my friends and talk with them and say, hey, listen, let's talk about this shit because
Yeah.
you're over there playing with the surface of what your problems are. It's not necessarily the military problems that cause these issues to hurt you so bad. That was a small portion of your life for
Yep.
years.
Yep.
They might have been very impactful moments, but is there something behind that that's making those impactful moments hurt more?
Yeah.
What's the root of this? And I wanted to say also, man, I'm very happy that you're here to share your story. Happy that you're doing comedy to inspire other people to laugh more. It's needed. I'm thankful that you're a present father and a present husband in your life. Like the first thing you said to me is, we'll have to make sure this is after my kids are resting. And
Yeah.
I really admire that about you, dude. I'm glad you do that, but I'm thankful for so much more than that. I'm thankful that you're still here. Uh, Tough times where you don't want to be here anymore, they can seem to overwhelm us. But when we
Yeah.
when we go through that process and we're able to grow through that process, it's not just one thing. You're
Yeah.
able to say, I'm still here. Let's make it for a reason, or I'm still here. It's for a reason, however that you may look at it. So I'm thankful for you being here, man.
Yeah. Can we just pause for just 1 second?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna run in, check.
So
All
you
right.
were just talking about jumping back into kind of pulling back from the idea of military and touching in with these childhood issues, which is very important. It's very important.
Yeah. I had to pull back that, like those layers of where this comes from and where I needed to adjust things. And the thing about like especially complex childhood trauma, is it, especially when you have kids, as you go through having kids, it comes at you. So it's like you won't know that like you have this thing. Like for me, like there's been stuff that I didn't know was like squirreled away. Like I didn't know these things bothered me until I had a kid. And then the kid was doing something, and I saw that how easy it is to go to my kid's basketball game. And all of a sudden you're like, man, why the hell did my parents never do this? And then all of a sudden you're depressed for a week. And then it's like, but there's stuff that's like way worse than that that you figure out too about yourself. Like hitting your kids, right? And we can talk about discipline versus hitting. I'm talking about hitting, big difference. And treating your kid, talking to your kids the way I was talked to by my like mom, bipolar manic depressive mom, who would just say the craziest things and tell me the craziest lies, and drive the car off the road and try to like kill us all. And, like I had to like diffuse with my wife, learning like because we wouldn't fight for the longest time, and it was this um great thing of that we both have gone through these complex childhoods, and rather than us both mirroring our childhoods, we were both just like, well, if I do this, this is going to happen, so I'm just going to stay out of everything. So we're both just like, ugh. So for a few years we just both let some of our needs kind of just go by the wayside.
Mm.
And like I had to learn, like I didn't speak up because I was afraid it was going to turn to a fight. And when I was a kid, a fight in the house meant the police were going to come, because it usually ended up with the police coming. It wasn't like a fight ended up with us just being upset and being okay with that,
Or
right?
even fixing the problem. It
Or
was just the
fixing the
cops.
problem. I didn't even know you could
Red and
fix the
white lights
problem.
are
I didn't
very
even know that was a
scary.
possibility.
Yeah.
You just had to fight until one of you was sad enough that you gave up, right? That's like, so like I had to learn that little bit of like these things that like keep you from saying, hey, wait a second, I just need 10 minutes to take a shower. And so you start like putting your own needs off. And I had to learn that like I put like too much of my own needs off.
Mm.
And then I would spiral out of control because like my wife's not letting me do anything. And then my therapist would be like, is she? Or are you just saying like you don't have time to do anything? And I'd be
Mm.
like, okay, it's the opposite. It's me that I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not saying to my wife, hey, can I have 10 minutes to go do this? I'm not, because I'm like, I have that childhood thing of like, if I express like, hey, mom, I need $5 for a field trip, she's going to fly off the handle and it's going to end in nuclear warfare.
Mm.
So like, just for me to like be like, hey, babe, could I get 10 minutes to do this or that or this? And I mean, in some respects, I'm sure it makes me out to be a really good husband because I'm like trying to do all these things at once. But at the end of the day, like, especially over this past year, um, doing comedy more and like carving this time out now for myself more. And I went to Scotland. I did Edinburgh Fringe Festival this last year. So I was away for my family for a month. And so to me, there was this big, immense guilt about going, this big, immense guilt about being away from everybody. My wife's going to hate me. She's just going to not want me to do this. And like my therapist is like, no, right? Like I had to sit down in therapy and be like, let all this out. And she's like, do you think your wife wants you to, if this was reversed, would you want your wife to go take this opportunity and do this thing and go? Would you be upset that she's going? No. Would you be mad that she's going? No. Would you be proud that she's doing this thing? Yeah. So what do you think she's thinking? Well, those same, you got to come to the realization she's thinking those same things.
Mm.
And so, it took a lot just to like get over these hurdles of like, like we talked about, like I put my kids as a priority, and it does cost me in the comedy business. I was just talking with another comedian about this the other night. Like I've put a lot of priority into just getting good at comedy. I've really tried to write and get my act together and get it polished and get it tight. And so I don't put as much time into like hanging out at the club, doing the open mic or like the after open mic, hanging out, just chit chatting, that kind of stuff, because I go home to the kids because I got to be up the next day at 6 o'clock when they wake up. So I've missed out definitely on opportunities because I don't hang. And so, and even another comedian, like I said, he pointed it out to me. He's like, man, you're up here, but you're underutilized because you just don't hang and nobody sees you. And it's like, I got to do what I got to do. So I've like, I've always looked at it as I have to figure out my way to do stand-up comedy
Mm.
and be a good dad and have a family, because I don't want to just be like put my foot into what everybody says to do, you know, the trashy comedians of the 90s that probably didn't talk to their kids. Or, the other side of it is like just don't do it, right? Just give it up. And I also see the other side of it as my kids have seen me go from that guy that was having a mental breakdown to the guy whose picture was on the side of the building when we pulled up to a hotel, right? They've seen that like there's a big thing that especially when we get anxiety, especially when we get depression, like we think it's the end, right? We think it's over, nothing will get us to the other side. It's never going to be good again. It's the worst it's ever going to be, and when you're wanting to end it, that's where you're at, right? You just end it, so you don't see this light, right? And now I'm at this point where I'm starting to see this light, and I'm looking back on that same thing just this year, like looking back on, wanting to die and wanting to kill myself and seeing it as like a totally different thing than I did at the time, and seeing the way I felt as different than I did at the time. Because like when I was in Scotland, I was there, I was walking through the streets, and all I could think about was like, I was listening to Linkin Park, not a good thing to listen to, but it's and it's talking about going through, like Linkin Park's, it's about going through childhood trauma. It's about being in the darkness
Yes.
as a kid. It's about getting through this stuff and
And
wanting to
that's why
scream.
I love what Chester's message is, man. I think one of my favorite things is What I've Done, and uh that's one of the favorite songs that he's put out because it makes me it forces me to reflect. And
Yeah,
when you're not in a good headspace, I do not recommend reflecting on what you've done to be better than your situation you were born into. I want to be a great dad, and
yeah.
this is something I can say about you just in this short conversation we've had so far. You healed yourself through parenting. I look at parenting as the greatest opportunity that I'm about to walk into next year. I've been so patient. Me and my wife have been hesitant in all the right ways, making sure our life is set up so we don't have to worry about poverty. Without worrying about poverty, you can you don't have that normal stress. You can stop worrying about the bills and start worrying about the effect you have on your kids, you
A
know?
little bit.
A little bit, right? Especially in this goddamn economy. Gas is high. But I really admire that you healed some of your things you were going through by being the best dad possible. I really like that.
It,
That is so inspiring to me, man.
so even the show that I was doing in Scotland,
Hmm.
it's my show was I Just Want to Be a Good Dad.
Oh,
So my comedy was all around like this thought of like, at the end of the day, I just want to be a good dad. I
mm,
don't know what I'm doing. I didn't have a good start. I I can't model my behavior after what I saw. I don't, what do I do in these situations? And so like my comedy is like sometimes it's these situations that come up and that I don't know how to deal with. Sometimes it's like dealing with not having parents and how you've had to like bring up with this. I'm trying to do a new bit on how I had to ride the short bus to school. Like when my dad died, I had to ride the short bus, like the short bus with all the special kids. And like it wasn't like, and then every time I do it, everybody thinks I'm making fun of the special kids, but I'm not. I'm making fun of the fact that everybody thought I was special because that's the bus I had to ride. So I couldn't get a girl to date me all through junior high
mm.
because everyone thought I was special.
Society standards, not yours.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it's like there's these funny things that have come from like these dark situations. And we adopted last year. So we did foster to adopt. Before we had the third kid, we signed up to be foster parents. We did a foster before we got pregnant, somehow got pregnant, accident baby, popped that baby out. And then my wife, she's a nurse, right? I said she's an ER nurse. And in the middle of the night, a baby was brought in. He was left on a doorstep, umbilical cord, like still attached, wrapped in a blanket, right? Worst Amazon fresh delivery
Worst,
ever.
worst Amazon fresh delivery.
Could you imagine that poor old man walked outside expecting it to be like Taco Bell and it's just a child? So poor little,
That's the real DoorDash. No, people don't talk about the
yeah,
real DoorDash when you drop a baby at somebody's doorstep and
and you just,
dash out of there. Like
yep.
no one talks about that.
But so this little baby is left, right? And my wife calls and she's telling me about it. And I was like, we know what's going to happen, right? We're going to see it pop up in the system. And then they're going to want somebody to take him. So I was like, well, let's just call the social worker now and say that we'll take him. And so we called her and she's like, yeah, once he pops up, I'll get a hold of you guys. And 3 days later, we took him from the NICU home. He was like skin and bones, a scrawny little baby. We think he was probably like 2 months premature based on like how big he was and everything. And then so that was a year ago. And then last August, like on his birthday, basically almost, we adopted him for his first birthday. And then
Oh my goodness.
so now he's
Congratulations,
just
my brother. That is beautiful.
so now he's just my little dude. But like it's that thing of like, once again, like I had to go through the foster system as a kid. So I know like that there's this really crappy system and there's not good people that take care of kids and that there's great people that try to take care of kids. And so I was like, well, let's take in a kid and we'll do it a kid that's younger than our kids. So we signed up for, I think at the time it was 5 and younger because that's how young our youngest was. And I was like, right, God gives us kids at us and they grow up at a certain level so we can go through it at a certain level was my idea. Let's
Hmm.
not take a teenager in until we've brought these two to teenage years
Oh
and
yeah.
then we'll see how it goes. Um, and then we ended up with this little baby. So now I have two kids that are under 2 years old, are running around and they're crazy. And I'm still trying to do stand-up comedy as much as I can. Um, and but it's like it's the I've talked about this on stage and it's easy because the easy jokes are to just shit on your kids. But honestly, it's the greatest thing ever. The most depressing thing ever watching kids grow up because it goes by so fast and you realize like how time is really fleeting. If I can give you any advice in having kids, it's just be patient and enjoy it because the more you're patient, you feel like you have more time,
Hmm.
right? It's so easy when we get flustered that time disappears, but the more you're patient, the more time you get, right? Take a deep breath, think about things. Even if the kid's crying, dude, it's only for a moment, right? The years of the craziness, the years of where it's stressful and no sleep is so short in comparison to like the big picture. Like I'm
And that's I completely agree with you right there, man. That's something I'm trying to emulate with how I feel because everybody's telling me, "Oh, yeah, you just wait. You think it's gonna be so great having kids?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think it's gonna be great having
it
kids.
is.
I can't wait. I can't wait to comfort my child." You think are you? I always ask people, "Are your kids a burden to you?" Because my kid, I'm gonna look at my kids as a goddamn blessing. I'm
Yeah.
excited to wake up in the middle of the night to a poopy diaper and clean and handle that so my wife can rest a couple more hours. She needs to look pretty. I don't need to look pretty. I could look ugly as hell. She's still gonna love me. I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah. I mean,
And
we just
that child, those moments, the small things, the smiles, the non-judging human being that's looking at you with admiration because it knows you're its dad.
yeah.
That is what I want.
And you
That is
learn
what that's my
from them.
selfish. That's the selfish thing. You learn. You said it right there, man. You learn from them, and that's what I'm
Like
excited for.
but you'll learn things you never imagined from your kids. Like me starting doing stand-up comedy was directly something I learned from my kids, right? Like so I, like I said, I was into podcasts. I was listening to all this stuff. I was like, I want to do this. I want to try this. I want to kind of do it. And I went to my daughter's dance recital, and they have it at the Washington Center in Olympia. And that place is huge, right? It seats like 600 people. And their dance recitals, they fill it out like 4 times over the weekend. So every show's like a sold out show. And I'm in there just watching these girls dance and this big recital, and I'm just sitting there like I gotta be in entertainment. I'm like, this is like just being around talented people. I need to be around talented people doing their thing for the rest of my life. Because
You
like
found your calling.
I had dabbled in it before going into the military, doing like broadcasting and television and hockey stuff, like behind the camera. And I was just sitting there and I reminisced with my wife about this just on our vacation. I was like, it was that moment, just sitting there, like seeing the girls dance thing and just being like, I gotta be around performing arts. Like I gotta be around performance I can't not do it. And I got into the open mics, and then I was just hooked on it. It was like heroin. I was just like, I started going 3 4 times a week. And I've said that, like, I definitely, it's a it's the rush, like the military, right? There's a hurry up and wait game where I get there 45 minutes early because I'm anxiety about being late, and then you have to sit there for 45 to 50 minutes for your spot, maybe even longer if you're later in the lineup. And then you do your 1 5 minute spot, and it's just adrenaline. And then you get off stage, and you have that like adrenaline come down. It's like the military just bottled in a safe little container. And
Hmm.
so it was and now it's not so much adrenaline pumping when I go up at an open mic. It's more like I'm doing work and I'm trying to work on something and get it done. But still at a show, like it's still adrenaline pumping to be at a show. I did a Moose Lodge last week, and I pull up and there's cars parked all the way down the highway on the side. I'm like, this place is packed, right? And I go in, it's full. This place is full. The bar in the back is full. There's more people than it can hold. And it's like we're doing a Moose Lodge in the middle of Montesano, nowhere,
Good thing the
Washington.
fire marshal's drunk, right? We good. Yeah,
They
he already drunk.
and they're like, okay, we don't want you to cuss or anything. And I'm already like, okay, this is gonna be a rough one for me, but we're gonna go in. So I made a joke. I was like, I put a swear jar on the thing. I was like, hey guys, I'm a Army infantry vet. My wife's a nurse. We cuss all the time at home. So I'm just gonna put this here. And if I swear, I'll throw some money into it. We'll give it to the youngest kid in the audience after we get all done. But it made a good joke. And the only time that I swore was when I got choked up talking about my dog. And then I was like, God, fuck, I can't do this without crying. And then I was like, damn, fuck, I got to give another dollar. And then it made a funny joke out of that teary moment where I almost cried on stage.
Oh
So it
man.
worked out.
I'm glad
It's
you found your kind of your
it's a
niche, right?
rush,
Your
man.
thing.
It's a rush. And like going to Scotland for me was just that big eye opener of like, I remember being a kid and being like, man, I would love to be in the movies, right? And I grew up in a town of 2,000 people in rural Colorado. Like I never thought that like I would be to a point where like I just met Janine Garofalo last night, and now I'm hanging out in Scotland, and we're all doing this festival together, and it's just big thing. And I had this big like moment of like, dude, like you can do stuff. You can get to where you want to. If you put your mind to something, you can get there. And then like stuff came back to me like that's the it's the military tried to teach you that, right? The military tried to teach you you can make that 2 mile run if you put your mind to it and you just push through and you get there. It's just that like there was all this other crap that you had to get along with the military that like instead of I wish I would have joined up during peacetime in the 90s, but I didn't.
The simple stuff, man. It's the simple stuff, dude. You think back and
But
and
you
wonder
do
what could be different.
you start to piece stuff together too,
Mm.
like stuff that you thought was a negative starts to become like that's the thing. I was listening to Linkin Park. Sharp Edges was a song, and it talks about turning your past, turning your thing into a positive, right? Turning it around. These sharp edges are what made us who we are, but that's who we are now. And so it's like that's what I was thinking about. Like this, I had to go through all of this grinder, right? It didn't make me better, but it made me who I am. And who I am can talk about these things in a way that other people don't. And like you've talked about like just talking about, you know, the depression and kind of going through these things. And I think a big thing is like knowing that there's another side, right? Knowing that you can be at that low point in that valley and think that it's all over, but there can be a mountain waiting there, like for you to still climb and for you to still summit. And then it's hard because even when you summit that mountain, now you got to come down, and now you're like, oh fuck, like, and then it's like, what's the next mountain? It's I can sit here and be depressed. Like I know the month after I got back from Scotland, I was like, ah, oh, what am I gonna do next? Like, what's next?
Well, that
But
happens to
this took
athletes
a
as
whole
well.
year, of work to get that one festival and everything that went along with it. And now it's over. Now what's next, right? And so I could have sat there and I could have got depressed, and I did get a little depressed for a couple weeks, and then I had to bounce back. And it's like just keep thinking like you can put your mind to something and achieve it. So what's the next thing I can put my mind to and make happen? What's the next thing? Like I want to my next thing is I want to do a web series. I want to start doing a YouTube series where when I go to these little towns like Montesano and these little places that no one's ever heard of, we can do a little tour around. We can do a little taste of something. We can do a little side quest over here and visit some weird factory or something that only that town has, right? And just put together this little Insomniac meets, you know, Travel Channel type web series. And I really want to do something like that. And I think that's kind of my next big goal, aside from just trying to work as a comedian as much as possible. Um, but I mean, I think like some of us are gifted to talk, some of us aren't gifted to talk. I mean, you do a podcast, you're gifted to talk, you work with people a lot, you're gifted to talk, right? But it's not as easy for everybody else. And even for us guys that we are gifted to talk, I've had to tell my therapist this: for everything that I tell you about, there's two things that I'm holding close to my chest that I don't want to say. Right. So, as much as it's easy for me to say, this is bothering me, there's probably something else there that's also bugging me. So, I know, and you probably know this too, like us talking guys, sometimes we need reaching out to too. So, your buddies that talk and like are the funny guys, uh, make sure they're okay, because sometimes we're just trying to get
Mask it.
everybody else through it without helping ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a big issue. I call it the hero complex, and it's a dangerous thing. I learned over the past year to never call somebody my hero. Not because someone's not my hero, but because that might not be a good thing to tell them. A lot of people have big feelings of needing to be that person subconsciously,
Yeah.
but they don't even realize they're spending all their time focusing on others laughing or others smiling or others feeling good, that they forget how they feel. And they're
Yeah.
doing it on but they do know they don't feel good, so they're trying to cover that up. And it can be a dangerous thing, man. For I appreciate you commenting on, being able to speak. Being able to speak has never been a hard thing for me, but I'll tell you what, being able to speak in front of other people about how I really feel has been terrifying my entire life. I never
Yeah.
got told how to deal with emotion. And that's part of this podcast thing, man. Honestly, I'm not a superstar. I'm just somebody who gives others a platform to share who they really are, behind the muscle, behind the guns, behind the uniform, behind the suicide prevention story, behind the I'm this. I'm society, how they view me. I'm going to use that as a phrase. Like for one of my guests, it was, yeah, I'm a motivational speaker, a singer songwriter, and a rapper. No, you're the first you.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself in boxes. There's greatness that you have that no one else has on this earth. But a lot of people feel like they have to uphold to some standard, and
Yeah.
uh, and
Like I
we don't
said,
have to be the
I had
strong
to
soldier. We don't
I
have to
had
be
to
the strong
think
soldier when you
dad.
come back home.
I had to be dad for a while. I had to detach from
Yes.
veteran everything that was going on and just be like, I'm just dad for a minute. And then I could take all that stuff back in, right? Like I had to just detach. I had to let all
Mhm.
those labels go. I had to let the thinking of myself as like disabled with PTSD and all these things. I had to push it all out for a little bit because it was like it was making me have to like feel that way.
And you
And
said it right there. PTSD.
yeah,
You have permission to start dreaming, and
yeah,
there's
because
programs for that.
that's
There's programs for that, man. Warrior Path. There's separation anxiety. How do we deal with separation anxiety? By finding out who we are,
yeah.
and finding the strengths within,
I can't
beyond
tell you
the things.
how many times I called my wife from Scotland in almost tears, just being like, I didn't know I could dream again. I didn't know I could have a dream and have it come true. And like that was like such a like I know like I can wax romantic about Scotland, and I could also tell you like the nitty gritty about how sometimes it was terrible. Uh, but like there was a lot of, for me, just epiphany things, just really just emotional epiphany moments that like a lot of people will see me as a comedian. They're like, you've got so much better. And it's like, I want to be like, it's these little things, but it's like, I'll just tell them the comedy thing that I figured out, and not that it was like, I figured out that I can dream again and that I can have confidence and that I can actually be confident in thinking that, hey, I can get to that next level at what this is and I can make it there and I can have that confidence, which is then going to carry over onto the stage, which is then going to carry over into the business side of this when it comes to asking for things or booking my own venues or booking my own shows. It's all comes into that confidence, and it's exactly what you said, right? The permission to dream again, right? I was so, I didn't know I could have a dream. And even like the process of being like, I got to be dad, that was me taking away my own dream and just being like, I got to serve other people for a while. And I had to learn. And it was that moment with my kids, right? Being like, I got to be around performing arts. That's my dream. That's my thing. That's where I got to go. And I just started on this little path and just pushed the boat away from shore. And it was literally like that. If anybody's listening, if you're thinking of like, I want to do this big thing, I want to take this big leap, it literally is just this one small step. I went to one open mic in town, local, at a small place with like 30 people, probably 10 people there that night. And I started. And I've gone from that moment to like 4 years later. I've got to work with really cool people. I've got to meet amazing people. I've got to go to across the world to do my show in Scotland, which was huge, like my show. And then I got to, and I'm still doing this. It's still going. It's still building. All from just like one little like push of just being like, I'm going to try it. And you don't always like everything you try. I've tried a lot of things. My wife can tell you I've started a lot of hobbies that have gone unfinished, but sometimes things stick, and it really is just like sometimes just one little push.
I appreciate that wisdom, my brother. I really like that. I've definitely tried some things, and some things I'm never gonna return to for sure. But
Yeah,
there's a lot of veterans that I really enjoy. I love this podcasting thing. Just hearing your story, the listeners are they're gonna feel something. I feel something right now. You're feeding me hope. You're feeding me that hope walks through a fire, faith leaps through it, right? You're
yeah,
giving me hope for the times where I run out of faith, and I appreciate that so much. Um, running into dead end jobs, dead end situations, dead end moments of motivation where your motivation runs out and you don't have the discipline to rely
yeah.
on, that backbone, that mental fortitude, that intestinal fortitude. I appreciate you touching on that, and everything from PTSD to situational, awareness of yourself.
Yeah,
We always look outward. Oh God, who's in this room? Are we watching this door? Is my back to a door? You know, what about who are we? Who are we
yeah.
when we pull back the layers? Am I a dad? Am I a comedian? Am I just Anthony Schuman?
What do I
And
enjoy?
you did a
Who
good
do I like to
job.
be around? Right? Just even the
Yes.
people you like to be around. Like for me, it was just like I want to be around performing arts. Start there. Like I got to be around music, right? So go start being around music. Do find whatever you can to be around music, because it might be just one little thing that carries you to like the next thing. Maybe you volunteer at the old folks home helping them bang on pots and pans, and then you meet some old lady whose daughter runs a program for music and she gets you a job there, and then it keeps going and things keep going. It's just it's weird the way things work, and sometimes you got to give up that, you got to have faith, but you got to have that hope that there's something good's going to happen. And when you don't, when we go through so much bad stuff, we start to lose that feeling that we're going to have hope again.
Mm,
And then it's so good, I mean, to be here personally, emotionally. And I know, and I'm going to say this to everybody out there, it's going to get low again. It's going to get bad again. It's going to be days where I'm not feeling great and I'm feeling terrible. And being a comedian and being on the road and alone, there's those things pop up a lot. But if you keep doing stuff, you keep doing stuff that scares you. I think that's a big part of what comedy is for me, is it's something that is constantly scary. And I've had to learn to be okay driving again, to drive halfway across the state or all the way across the state to go do road gigs. And it's because I want to do comedy so much. It's pushed me to want to drive, to want to get out, to want to do these things. And it's just built, it's built, it's built, it's built. And so, like, the little things that I was scared of, now it's like, okay, go to another foreign country by yourself and do this thing. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna go do it. And I come back, my wife's like, I couldn't even thought of like that. And I'm like, once again, I didn't think it was that big of a deal because I'm just like doing what's in my brain. And it's like starting to realize that, one, that you're your own person. And once again, that those things have shaped you to be who you are. And then now you get to use those things. You get to use that dark humor that you've developed. You get to use that ability to read people's faces in weird, awkward situations, because you always are sharing dark stories. So you got to figure out when you got to put a joke in there. And now I get to use those things and build off of it. And I've loved it. I've loved every minute of it. I mean, if people want to see me, all my shows are on my website, anthonyschuman.com. Um, I'm still very, very local here in Washington, Oregon, Idaho area. So if you're in those areas, I'm getting around quite a bit and starting to headline shows. So that would be great to see people out there. Come support veterans doing comedy. There's a lot of veterans getting into comedy, getting into stand-up comedy. We I don't talk about like war stories and stuff really on stage. So if that's like something that you're trying to steer clear of, I don't kind of get into that. I talk about my kids and my family and kind of how I deal with it, but my sense of humor comes from that place. So you'll definitely get that flavor. You'll definitely tell that I'm an infantry vet and that I have that dark sense of humor.
Mm. Well, you know what, how I feel about the infantry and the army, man. I got Sean Stokes, Jason Jarman. I got quite a few friends that were in the infantry, and I love the the fighting force of the army, the original fighting force. Every person carrying a rifle, doing what needs to be done to protect this country. It's something I support 150,000%. And for those superstars who say you can't have 150% support, yes, I can, motherfucker. So, because it's my shit. So it is what it is. I want to say thank you, Anthony. I appreciate your time so much.
Thank you so
I
much.
I appreciate your insight, and I look forward to the feedback this is gonna generate, obviously, but also following your journey. I'd love to come see you at a show with my wife
I would love it.
and listen. I'm gonna fall apart. I'm a big laugher. I love there's nothing more exciting to me than the idea of being a father. That is that's like life's greatest adventure, you know,
Oh,
being a leader for another child. I didn't have the best childhood. I had a good childhood, but not the best one. And there's one thing I would say is I love the idea of you finding who you need to be in the future by just focusing on being a dad. I really admire that about you, and I cannot wait to come and see you at a show, my brother. Thank you so much for your
thank
time,
you.
and thank you for taking this time to listen in. Everybody who's listening, thank you so much for another episode of Off the Deep End podcast. Your support is overwhelming as always. Thank you for the messages on Instagram, Facebook, my podcast Facebook page, and my normal Facebook page. Thank you for the t-shirt sales, and thank you for supporting this mission of sharing veteran stories with this service and sacrifice series. There's nothing that's closer to my heart than finding common ground by sharing our experiences. So thank you so much for tapping in, and you know what to do. Listen to the next one. Bye bye.